Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain. Now, this story may have been somewhat overshadowed this week by the duplicitous duo's disgusting disaster tourism.
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle wanted the world to stop speculating about their children. Why did their own messaging create so many contradictions that critics can still point to years later and say this doesn't add up? That's the core of what royal biographer Tom Bower and royal commentator Lady Colin Campbell keep circling. Not that they can prove a hidden scenario on camera, but that the public was handed a sequence of confusing decisions, unusual gaps, and shifting details that made speculation inevitable. And in the royal world, inevitable speculation is not a small thing, because royal births aren't treated like normal celebrity births. They're treated like constitutional events. That's why, for generations, royal births follow a rigid playbook. Approved medical oversight, consistent palace confirmations, controlled but clear communication, and a timeline that doesn't change after the fact. The monarchy doesn't do that because it loves attention, it does it because certainty is the point. So when Archie's birth was announced in a way that some critics say didn't follow that expected playbook.
Tom, do you think Harry and Meghan are fast learning what they signed away when they took this Netflix big moolah? And I would say they signed away their credibility and their dignity.
Well, that's our view, but it's not theirs. They need the money, and they need it now more than ever because they've got no other source of income. So I think they're just stuck with the devil now. They're tied to Netflix, they're tied to their book, and all the criticism they're going to take means nothing because that's the only way they can earn their money.
It triggered a chain reaction that Harry and Meghan may not have understood in the moment. The more you withhold, the more people fill the empty space with their own theories. And the more aggressively you try to shut those theories down, the more valuable they become to the people pushing them. Tom Bower's argument, in essence, is about credibility. He has repeatedly positioned Harry and Meghan as people who, in his view, became obsessed with narrative control. And when narrative control collides with royal protocol, the collision creates smoke even if there's no fire. Lady Colin Campbell pushes it further by claiming there were inconsistencies that should never exist around a birth connected to the line of succession. And she frames that as a monarchy problem, not just a Sussex problem.
This case about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump. The fact is, Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince Archie.
Now, before anyone twists this into something uglier than it needs to be, let's set the boundaries clearly. Surrogacy is not a moral scandal. Fertility journeys aren't shameful. Medical privacy is real, and children should never be targeted. Ever. The actual controversy that critics weaponise is not how a child is born. It's whether the public record and palace messaging were handled in a way that left room for doubt. And here's why that matters. The royal institution has always used standard confirmations as a shield not only for the monarchy, but for the children themselves, because the cruelest kind of rumour is the kind that grows around a kid who never asked to be famous. Critics argue that Harry and Meghan's choices, whether intentional or simply chaotic, made their children a magnet for suspicion. One of the biggest flashpoints is the timing and wording of early announcements around Archie's birth, which some commentators claim appeared confusing, with official messaging that did not satisfy the press corps who usually track every royal movement like it's a national sport. Then came the documentation chatter. Online sleuths, royal YouTubers, and commentators pointed to alterations and formatting details and treated them like smoking guns. While defenders argued these things can be administrative, routine, or even misinterpreted by people desperate for drama. But the reason this stays alive isn't because the internet is brilliant. It's because, historically, the royal machine normally closes these doors tightly. When the doors were left even slightly open, the internet did what it always does. It kicked them wide open. And in that storm, Bower and Lady C became two of the loudest credible voices, not because everyone agrees with them.
He's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by the early death of his mother, Diana. And he very foolishly blames the media for her, in his words, which is complete nonsense. But I think he loved the adulation. He loved it when he was being praised, especially when he was a soldier. But then he became criticised, firstly because he became drunk in public.
But if she hasn't had the children herself, or Harry hadn't been involved, then they can't be in the royal line. They have to have royal blood, those little ones. Without that, there's no chance of them becoming a member of the royal.
The royal mask is slipping, and what Lady Colin Campbell and Tom Bower just revealed about art.
But because they have the kind of reputations that make people think, they wouldn't say this if they didn't believe they had something. The viral power of this story comes from that tension. On one side, you have the Sussex brand, built on privacy, trauma, boundaries, and media mistrust. On the other side, you have a monarchy built on continuity, tradition, and institutional transparency where it suits them. When Harry and Meghan were working royals, the palace could absorb the contradictions and smooth them over. Once they left, they controlled their own messaging. And critics say the control became the problem, because the moment they monetized their narrative through documentaries, interviews, memoir claims, and major deals, the audience expectation flipped. If you're selling your truth, you're inviting scrutiny. And scrutiny doesn't politely stop at the edge of your preferred topics. It goes exactly where you don't want it to go. That's the uncomfortable reality of public storytelling. You can't demand the world watch your version and then call it harassment when the world asks for receipts. At the same time, receipts in medical matters are sensitive, and demanding them can become ugly fast, so the ethical line is thin. But critics exploit that thin line by reframing it as, they could end this instantly, because that sounds like the simplest conclusion. The Sussex side, of course, would argue the opposite, that giving in to invasive demands creates a precedent where harassment works, and that the public does not have a right to private medical details just because someone is famous. That's a defensible argument. The problem is, the monarchy itself has historically operated differently. Royal births are institutional moments, not purely private moments. And Harry and Meghan tried to apply celebrity privacy logic to royal constitutional tradition, and that mismatch produced a chaos gap. Now, the chaos gap has been filled with the loudest possible interpretations. Claims of cover-ups, claims of deception, claims that staff were silenced, claims that timelines don't align with normal procedures. Are those claims proven? Not in any court, not in any official finding. But in the online attention economy, not proven doesn't mean not profitable. It means ongoing series. And this is where Tom Bower's presence matters. He doesn't have to prove the wildest rumours to fuel the fire. He only has to keep highlighting patterns where, in his view, Harry and Meghan's narrative has shifted over time or has been undermined by contradictions. The bigger story, if you step back, isn't what happened in a hospital. It's what happens to a public brand when trust collapses. Because once a public figure is seen as unreliable, fairly or unfairly, every new statement is treated like a strategic move instead of a sincere truth. That's why even unrelated claims get dragged into the same vortex. Bullying allegations, staff complaints, disputes with family members, legal threats, and media wars. Critics argue there's a repeated cycle. Make big claims, demand belief, threaten consequences, offer limited verifiable detail, then blame the media when people ask questions. Supporters argue that's backwards. The